Arbor's always cool. With the arts.
And so Wendell and Trunino.
Huh? I started playing Ann Arbor when I first came back from New York in 1970.
Wow.
And playing this audience is like being in heaven. You know? Because people was really receptive to all kinds of music, whether it was jazz, the bebop, or avant-garde, or funk. I used to play the Blind Pig.
Oh,
You know, that's going way back. You know, and Earl.
Yeah.
The Earl, and there was another place, guy owned it that played the piano. His name was Rick.
Rick Rowe?
No. Burgess? It was at the Del Rio.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He played with the Earl for a long time too. Rick Burgess.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
Was that
Robert
his name?
Warren. Yeah.
That's
You
his
got-
name.
Yeah.
My mind's cool.
Well, let's. So it's gonna feel a little weird for us to be using the microphones with this nice little intimate audience,
Hi.
but
Streaming.
Hi.
we're doing this because we want to
Hi.
say hello to all of our friends in the virtual universe over here. We have a
Hi.
lot of students tuning in from the
Hi.
local area
Where are
schools,
the cameras at?
and we're really excited
Hi.
and pleased to be having this conversation with two of the most phenomenal musicians in not only southeastern Michigan, but in the world. Really, it's an honor and a privilege for us to have these folks here. I'm going to start by introducing my man over here, all the way on the left. If you don't know his name by now, you will very soon. He's one of the most fabulous musicians. He's so incredibly passionate about the music, just a positive force in the community. And so we're really looking forward to seeing where he goes with his career. So please put your hands together for Trunino Lowe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this man right here to my left, it's I'm shaking just being next to him. He's the
He's got a joke.
yeah. This is a man that needs no introduction, but if you don't know, he's played with everybody from Sun Ra to Aretha Franklin to Marcus Belgrave. Like, he is a pioneer. Yeah, Grant Green. He's a pioneer here in southeastern Michigan in Detroit. He also founded Tribe Records, an amazing record label in the 70s and 80s and into the present day. And he's not only a genius musician, but a community activist, advocate, somebody who really has passed on this music to the next generation, and it's really such an honor to have him here today. So please put your hands together for Wendell Harrison.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I don't think my mic is on.
I think it's good, yeah.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
we
right.
just can't hear ourselves. It's all good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to open this up in just a second if folks have questions, but I did want to just start with both of you all in terms of getting to know a little bit about your background as a musician. And I want to start all the way back because I've known both of you all for quite a while, but I don't know, little baby Trunino and baby Wendell. and so what I want to figure out is what was your first experience with music, and then transitioning into when did jazz start to become and play a part in your life, and how did that manifest for you as a young person? Not that you're not young now, both of you.
You want me to start? All right. Let's see. My introduction to music has been I've been very fortunate to have like parents and like grandparents who like listen to a lot of different music. So like I would say it really was like me riding in the car and my grandparents and like being at their house, especially so my granddaddy, my grandma and my granddaddy had this record collection in the crib, and like they were like, he wouldn't do it all the time, but when he did turn on some records, I will always remember those days fondly. I still remember those days fondly right now. He would like go pull out a records like, yeah, we gonna listen to this today, and then they'll just be up bumping records all day, and then he'll switch records when he'll have like, it'll be like Christmas or Thanksgiving and everybody be at the house. He'll go to his record collection and start showing off all his records, and then they'll just all be listening to records. I didn't understand the significance of that at the time, but it was just like, I always was hearing a whole bunch of music. So like music was always been a part of my life, and it's just like I always was listening to like a whole bunch of different things, especially like music from like the 70s and the 80s. That's my stuff. 70s, 80s, and the 90s, cause like that's my stuff. Cause like my mom was born in like born in 79, so like she was like. My mom was born in 79, so like came up on all the 80s stuff. Mm-hmm. And so like she was listening to all of that. And then my mama went to high school in the 90s. So like that was like a whole thing too. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, hip hop and everything.
So all of that is like in my like musical background when it comes like to listening and like things that I've consumed.
Going back to your grandparents,
mm-hmm.
Do you remember any of those records, what you were hearing in the house at the early stages? Or maybe you didn't realize at the time, but there was some kind of, subliminal messaging in terms of, check this out.
I don't know that's the thing. Like, he has so many records. I didn't know what was what when I was listening to it. I just always knew it sounded good and it felt good to me. So, like, I never really knew exactly which record he would be playing, but he was just playing, like, he would just play they'll just play a record, and I'll just be like, all right, cool. This ain't boring. I can enjoy this. Like, I feel like I've been, like, good with that since I was a kid, And then, like, because that was back when I was growing up in Detroit. That was back when, like, V98.7 was a radio station, and that was, like, the smooth jazz station. And then, like, before my grandfather passed away, they had WJZZ was still around, and he used to listen to that. This was like late 90s, early 2000s, because I was born in 98. My birthday actually was yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
The 17th. Yeah, just turned 24.
His brother was born on the 16th.
Oh, wow. See, look, Aquarius.
Yeah.
Oh man. But yeah, I don't know exactly which records they were. I just always enjoyed it. And there was certain ones like that used to just like rock. And my granddaddy always kept up with everything. Like I was like a couple years ago when I got old enough to start understanding looking at records and stuff, I would go through the record collection. I asked my grandma to show me how to work this thing, and she showed me how to work it. I was like, oh, cool, this is pretty simple. So I would go through his record collection and just listen to stuff. But then on the other side of the thing, he had like another thing full of CDs. When CDs became popular, because he used to listen to a whole bunch of CDs in the car when we would ride with him. I was looking at his CD thing. He had Quincy Jones. He had Tupac in there. He had like Michael Jackson. Like, he had all the records. My granddaddy kept up with his music. He had R. Kelly in there. That's what messed me up. I was like, is these my mama's CDs? He was like, no, these mine. I'm like, oh, dang. But like, and I remember asking my mama that. I was like, Mama, is these, y'all had y'all CDs? She was like, nah, he would go and buy the CDs when they came out. And we would just listen to it because he got it. I was like, oh, so you ain't buying no CDs? He was like, we bought CDs, but like, when you got somebody who listened to CDs, it really didn't make it different because you knew they was going to get it. So y'all just wait till you get it, and I'll listen to it when you got it. Definitely. Makes a lot of sense.
But hearing all of that, Trunino, it's fascinating because it's, like I said, you're somebody that's always had like an infectious passion for the music, and as far as I've known you. And I do think it is a rare thing for a kid at a really young age, to hear their grandparents hearing records, to hear their parents playing CDs and be like, oh, I like this. I love this. And like, I think a lot of kids, I'm one of them, was like, oh, I want to go play baseball or basketball or video games, and to be affected viscerally from that age and never have that be fleeting, that's I think very powerful, and it shows today, however many years later.
Man, it's kind of interesting you say that because like everybody tried to get me to be that typical kid that like plays sports and stuff, and I suck at sports. No, like seriously, like I was on the football team, I never played. Soon as I get on the field, I'll get kicked off. At practices, I will be so busy because like I'll be all over the place. Like I was a busy kid. So like when I was young, like I would always be the one like that had to run laps around the field because like while everybody's practicing the plays, because I'll be like not focused on what's going on. Like and like I tried to play basketball, tried to do a lot of things to fit in with the crowd with what all the other kids was doing, and I just never got into it, but it never was something that really interests me, Mm-hmm. The only thing that like sparked my interest was like, and that's where it leads to like your second question. It was like I got in the 3rd grade. I was going to Detroit Academy of Arts and Sciences at the time, and that's when I started music. And my first instrument was a recorder. And like Miss Keisha Stewart, her last name's Bowden now because she's married. But Miss Keisha Stewart, she's Miss Stewart to me. I don't care. She was the one that got me into all of this because like her classroom was so significant because like she had a lot of like music and like a lot of art around the room. But the one thing that caught my attention, she had a whole bunch of pictures of different like famous jazz musicians. Especially coming from the African American culture, like a lot of famous black jazz musicians sitting around. Definitely. And like they would be like she had Miles, Coltrane, Charlie Parker, but the picture I used to stare at every single day for about 5 minutes when I walked in her classroom was a picture of Dizzy puffing his cheeks out. Like Dizzy literally would just be like and that picture caught my attention every single day. So it was one day she was like, yeah, you keep looking at this picture. I was like, yeah, who is this? Because why is his cheek so big like that? She was like, oh, his name's Dizzy Gillespie. He plays the trumpet. And then she had another picture of him on the side. And he had his Martin committee. He was just standing there just playing. But his cheeks was out. I'm like, why he keep puffing his cheeks out? Like, why is his cheek so big? Like, that's like inhumane how big his cheeks is.
And you didn't play trumpet at all at this point. You were just,
Nah, so like it was like, I had just asked her like, yeah, but who is he? And then she was like, all right, cool, I got you the next class. And I was like, that was the last one to leave that day. So the next class, we lined up, walked into her other class. She had another classroom. She either had the music room or she'll use a classroom in the middle of the hallway. Why? I don't know. But it would just be there. And it was nothing music related in there. It was just like a regular classroom. But we went in that classroom because they had like a radio thing in there. She gave us all these yellow books, turned to a certain page, and Dizzy was on the page. It was just a page. It was like his picture was on one side, and it was just like a short little thing on the other side. But it was a CD that went with the book that said so much more than the book did. So like she played the CD, was chilling. He's talking about him, and then she was like, being interactive as most teachers do, just talking about like, yeah, so what did you hear him say? Yeah, he did this, he did that. All right, cool, I'm gonna keep playing it. But then it was like the minute he started playing the trumpet, the minute I heard him play the trumpet, I think I was the only one in the classroom losing my mind. Like I was like, I'm like, I was just like, I was like struck because I was like, and then like, at the end of class, I remember asking Miss Stewart. That was my introduction to jazz because I didn't know that was jazz until I heard it. Because I feel like my grandparents would play like a lot of like the late James Moody, late Dizzy stuff when they was going to the other side. Mm-hmm. But it was more so like, yeah, I didn't hear like swing like that until that. And unless they played it and I didn't know what it was. So like,
definitely.
Yeah. So like at that time I was able to comprehend what I was hearing. I don't know how I was able to comprehend that, but I just know I was like, and then like by the time I asked her like, yeah, you said he played the trumpet? She was like, yeah. I said, I'm joining band next year and I'm playing the trumpet. Wow. So like the next year we had to pick our electives. I picked music, and then she was asking everybody what instrument they want to play. I said I wanted to play the trumpet. She's like, oh, you remembered that? Cool. Yeah, you gonna play the trumpet then. She thought I was gonna forget. I don't know how I remembered that because I was so young. It was like, that was like in the 4th grade. And then like, yeah, she started me. And then from there, I left there and then I went to DPS, and it was rough because like I was dealing with music programs until I got to middle school. Like my elementary time, because I had went to Wayne Elementary. And when I went there, like Miss Stewart showed me so much within like the short time I was there. Like she had me playing basically half of my major scales already and like all the other stuff. And like I got to my middle Yeah, that's middle school. I'm talking elementary. Miss Stewart, like showed me so much. Mr. Lee, when I came in, he was like, "Dang, we not even on scales yet. We trying to teach people how to play notes." I'm like, "Oh, okay." So like I was like the advanced person without trying to be the advanced person. But then when I got to middle school and I got Herbert Cage, Mr. Cage, he was that's my dude. I love him so much. If he's watching this, I love you, man. Seriously. Herbert Cage, he's my band dad, like, with everything in me, because he was the only one who didn't, like, he tolerated me because I was still a hyper child.
Definitely.
But at the same time, he was, like, pushing me musically. Like, I got
can't be hyper with the mouthpiece on your face. You know?
It ain't even just that. It ain't even just that. He was just like, man, it got to a point where, like, he was like, nah, man, you got a lot going on. You need to be able, you need to start practicing. So, like, it was one day I was in B band at the time. That's like second band, not the top band. I was in the second band at the time, and he was like, I was sitting first because, like, I knew my scales and stuff. But it was one day he randomly said, we got a chair challenge. I don't know if y'all know what that is, but, like, when you in the band and you want to play, like, a certain part and you want to be in a certain chair, you would challenge someone on that chair. So Mr. Cage knew that knew at the time that I wasn't practicing. I had stopped practicing my major scales in 2 octaves because that's all he wanted me to do. He was like, you could play 1 octave. You got to play 2 octaves. Well, Miss Scales, yeah. I'm getting there. Yeah. So, like, Mr. Cage had me sitting in chair, and he was like, yeah, because I was sitting second at the time. Mm-hmm. He was like, yeah, we got a chair challenge. So then this one kid, like, dang, what was his name? I don't remember his name. But, like, he made me challenge him, and he won the challenge, right? So I had to move down a chair, and I was furious. So I started shedding, and, like, the next week, I would say the next 2 weeks, the next week or two, because he wouldn't let me challenge him. Because I came back the next day like, I want my chair back. I'm ready for a challenge. He was like, you ain't ready. I was like, I am. Because I was practicing that day when I left. I was ready. I was ready. And he was like, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. And then he finally let me do it, and I got my chair back. And then I went all the way to first. He was like, yeah, you got to keep practicing. And that just lit the practicing flame up.
Yeah. That's awesome. Like,
yeah, I know I said a lot.
No,
I'm sorry.
no. It's so great. But I think that, yeah. And going.
She's the one. She was the one, because I didn't start working with Miss Scales. It's funny. I started working with Miss Scales in the 6th grade, but that was when Marion used to come. Because Miss Hayden was the first person who gave me Marion Hayden. That's mama. She's mama to everybody my age. She's mama. She our mama. She's our jazz musical mama. Mama, I love you. Seriously. But Miss Hayden was the one. I didn't start playing jazz until she started coming to my middle school. She used to come down, her, and, like, she would bring, like, a group of students from the University of Michigan. Because she was teaching there. No, I met her in the 6th grade, man. Because I didn't meet you. I met you in the 6th grade, but I wasn't playing till the 7th grade. Nuh-uh. Yeah, I was trying to play trumpet, but that was when, like, Michael Steele, David, when Lewis was playing saxophone, they always doing the jazz stuff before I got there. The Bonner brothers, Tony, all of them was doing the jazz stuff before I got there.
Well, Trunino, what's fascinating about that is what Trunino just named a bunch of musicians, and to anybody who's not familiar or deeply familiar with the scene, these are just middle school kids, you know? But all of the musicians he just named, like Tony Stanford, like an award-winning national touring gospel bass player, Lewis Jones, who you're going to hear tonight, amazing drummer, and it's all of these students.
He was playing saxophone.
He was playing saxophone, and the Xavier Bonner is another one, another amazing saxophone player. And these are all kids who grew up together. And what I want to point out is, under extremely passionate and diligent and hardworking educators, and everybody that you've named so far, it's really a testament to your being receptive to the knowledge of these great teachers and to the knowledge of these great educators, which I love hearing your trajectory in that way. But it kind of led me to a thought, just trying to get my man Wendell Harrison back up here for a second, thinking about I've been thinking a lot about in jazz music, right? There's jazz education in college and in schools now, but really, I think most bebop musicians realize that there was one musician who pedagogically kind of completely changed the game for jazz music.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the recently departed, the legendary Detroiter Barry Harris. And Barry Harris was a pianist who is from Detroit originally. He lived, I think, into his 30s in Detroit before moving to New York. Maybe the age might be early 30s, yeah, through the 1950s.
That was his teacher.
Yeah, but Barry Harris is to this day considered the greatest jazz pedagogue, if not one of the greatest, greatest pianists of all time. He's just a fabulous musician, bebop musician, and there are not very many folks who got to experience a relationship as a student with him in the 1950s. And those folks, if you know anything about jazz music, are folks like Charles McPherson and Lonnie Hillier and these tremendous names in jazz, and one of them
like Roy Brooks.
Roy Brooks, and one of
James Jamerson.
James Jamerson, yeah, exactly.
Because I was in school with James Jamerson and Lonnie Hilliard and Charles McPherson. They had a group along with Roy Brooks, and they were like 17, 18 years old, and Roy was playing with the Four Tops and Temptations. He was going on the road to Vegas while he was in high school, you know. And same with James Jamerson. And he played like the great Ray Brown. But
that's for anybody who's not familiar, James Jamerson, like the greatest Motown bass player, electric bass player on all of those great Motown records. But what you're saying, he was playing an upright bass, right?
This is before the electric.
Before the electric, arguably the greatest electric bass player of all time. Yeah. Wendell knew him way back before all of that.
And he had a big family in high school. He had kids, you know. But he was going out on the road and he was missing classes and stuff. He finished high school late, you know. And at the time, I moved to New York and was working at 19, and was working with people like Grant Green and Lloyd Price and Chuck Jackson, Sun Ra. It was a gamut of artists. And someone said, I'll never forget, James Jamerson was playing upright bass and was the foundation of Motown. I couldn't believe it. I said, well, what is Motown? Because like when I did a recording for Gordy, and it was in a basement on West Grand Boulevard in Detroit, you know, and he was small. He was working at the factory, and he was getting sessions. Actually, James Jamerson, Benny Benjamin, and piano player by the name of Boo Boo Turner. Now he was bebop piano player, but all these guys that Gordy recorded was jazz musicians, and mainly bebop musicians that played commercial music to pay bills. You know, I mean, they wasn't really that passionate about it. It was their foundation, their direction was into like the bebop, the Charlie Parker, Bud Powell, Max Roach, and they were, every time they would go to a Motown session, it was like going to a factory or something, you know.
Got to do the job.
Now, but getting back to where I was in New York, and they said Motown had blew up. I mean, it was really big. I couldn't believe it. And they said James Jamerson was the foundation. I said, what? Because he's playing upright bass, you know,
yeah,
really.
Studying with Barry Harris?
Yeah, really aesthetic. Well, he was not only studying, but playing with Barry. He had a group with Barry and James Jamerson and Roy Brooks.
Wow.
Louis Hayes, you know, that kind of thing. And this is the 60s now. Another friend of mine, Marcus Belgrave, Phil Ranlin, Marcus came from Chester, Pennsylvania to Detroit to work with Gordy. This is in maybe 65, 66. He would come through with Ray Charles, but he didn't stay. But This time, I think about 65 or 66, he stayed. And Phil Ramlin, that I met on the road, he was staying in Indianapolis. He had moved to Detroit, working, and Gordy was attracting musicians from all over the country to do these sessions, and I couldn't believe it. From the basement, you know.
And you were in New York during this time, right?
I was in New York.
So it's in your hometown. All these musicians are moving. And
I couldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine.
Wow.
I moved to New York, and people coming everywhere to Detroit. You know, always been backwards. You know, but anyway, because I was started working for Atlantic Records. I recorded a lot with Hank Crawford on Atlantic Records and other labels in New York. But it was really spellbound when I heard about Gordy's success, you know. And when in New York, I worked a lot, you know, with Dionne Warwick, Big Maybelle. I learned how to write big band arrangements dealing with the Hank Crawford band, and also worked with Lloyd. Did a lot of big band work, you know, as well as. Back in the day, if you could write for a big band and read, because we learned how to read in high school, and solo, and teach, you could make it. You had to do about 5 things. you had to wear 5 hats. You know, you had to, because you go on the road with somebody. Okay. Those guys would go on the road about 3 times a year, and they come back, and they wouldn't have to work so much because they would have record royalties and stuff like. Sometimes the record company would put them up in a hotel, but the side men, you know, side musicians would have to say, "Well, I'm not working now, so what can I do?" So we ended up teaching. We ended up. Writing arrangements for singers and whatnot, and at that time we had to write for big band, you know, or at least 6 horns, you know. So we had to learn how to do that, you know. Meanwhile, this what we was doing was never taught. It wasn't a curriculum in college or high school, you know. It never got credit. I mean, the what we was doing on the academic level was never a curriculum in college up until, let me say, the 70s.
Yeah.
The 70s, and jazz was accepted along with black history.
Can you speak on that a little bit in terms of, like, nowadays, I think it's traditional, right? Trunino, you're at Michigan State University right now. I went to the U of M, and there's all these folks that are going to school studying this music. But you lived it in a time in which that wasn't happening, and I think it's a misconception sometimes where some folks say, oh wow, it's great that it's been accepted by academia and it's in the curriculums and whatnot, but I think that I've heard from you and I've heard from a lot of other musicians that there are intangible qualities of being on the road and actually doing it. That's and being in the space, and so what kind of things were you learning on the road that you don't think are possible really to learn in the classroom?
Well, thank God I was around early in a teenage period. I was studying with Barry Harris. I got the foundation with Barry.
And that was just at his house, right?
Yeah, that was at his house. And I worked with, and then in school I was reading. I played clarinet in school. And then I begged my mother to get a saxophone when I heard Charles McPherson play.
Wow.
You know, and so I got, at 17, 18 years old, I was playing with Marvin Gaye. Wow. You know, and
just casually, you know.
But see, he wasn't famous.
Wow.
Not to me. He wasn't Charlie Parker, a Trey. See, I'm in between. It's like a kind of like a eclectic kind of guy, because I developed in the language of a Parker, but I heard John Coltrane, and I kind of adapted that. And when I did, Barry cut me. I don't want those Looney Tunes played in my house.
Wow.
You know, because he was so into this bebop language. You know, nothing else mattered because he was a teacher. You know, Detroit is famous for producing teachers because Donald Byrd was a great teacher. You know, Yusuf Lateef, he had a PhD. Both of these guys had PhDs. He had a doctorate. Donald Byrd had a doctorate. Yusuf had a doctorate, and Barry Harris had a degree as well. You know, and Detroit produced, you know, intellectually these bebop musicians that could teach as well as play.
Which that was a new concept at the time, right? In terms of being pretty academic about things.
The way they approached it, they were very academic. But the culture, we always had, it was like an African culture where you showed, the adults will always show the up and coming students the language and the trade. Mm-hmm. The trade. It's like a butcher or a baker or you know. Is hand me down, you know, or if a guy in the community, he was a professional musician, would hear a student that could read, they would show him something automatically. I mean, they didn't have to be told because usually when you show somebody something, if if they really was inspired, a couple of years you see him. You ready to hire him, take him on the road or something, give him a job, you know, because it's all about work. See, when you play on the bandstand, people want to see somebody young and pretty.
That's why we have you here.
That buzz passed. but usually, you know. And that's what, I mean, the opportunities I was telling these kids, the door is wide open when you're like 15, 16 years old, you're looking good, you got energy, you're not riddled with arthritis, you know, and you know, the ladies is looking at you and whatnot. You want that on your bandstand. You know, you don't want a person on the bandstand getting ready to have a stroke, you know. So, but that's just a natural thing. In all work, all levels of work, you want the young folks is the one that you really want because they have the energy, and they usually up on the technology, and they willing to learn, whatnot. So it was like when I was coming up in the 50s and 60s, I had a lot of opportunities when I was like between 15 and 30. You know, I played with. My activities read like a grocery list, you know, playing with different people, you know, all kinds of music, not just jazz, but big band, rock, blues, Latin, and avant-garde, you know, and so the main thing is just like today, always show students, they come by my studio. Like tomorrow I got a student.
Yeah.
Sunday I got a student coming up. I met him I was on the road.
Oh, wow.
Early this year. You know the Celly tour?
Mm-hmm.
I was up in Baldwin. And we went to about 5 cities up north, you know. It was pandemic time, you know, but people came out out of their houses to hear some live music. We was playing in parks and on the beaches like Ludington and places near Traverse City. You know, I can't remember all the folks now, all the places we played. But they came. So anyway, the guy said, "I met you in Baldwin. Do you give lessons?" I'm a flute player. So I said, yes. So he came to my house. I gave him the address, and I gave him my instructions. I have a bebopper's method book that I authored back in '80s, you know.
It's for sale over in the green room over here.
It's the key to the language, and so tomorrow he's coming for his first lesson. I gave him the book. I say read the book and listen to the tapes, listen to the CD, and study. I gave him about three, 4 chapters to study. So tomorrow, Sunday, he'll come to my studio for his first lesson. So
it still continues.
It's still Well,
teaching.
I have. I was teaching. Oh man, I was teaching about 20 years in Detroit. I was taught at a Renaissance High, Duke Ellington, Trunino, King High School, DSA.
Yeah, and on top of that, all of that too, like going into the schools and stuff. I think the first time I became acquainted with you, Wendell, was on Tuesdays at your house. and Wendell talking about going to Barry Harris's house to learn lessons. And well, I moved to Detroit a few years ago, and I had a buddy who was a bass player, and he goes, "Hey man, there's this legendary saxophone player who lives in the city, and he just has folks over every Tuesday to play tunes, and it's ages 18 to I don't know, and just working, working on music and learning together. And it was, for me, that was such a formative time as a saxophone player, just because it wasn't a lesson formally, but to play next to you and just to play this music. And Wendell's wife, Pam, is a phenomenal pianist and composer, and so she was involved. And so just all the different levels of outreach that you've had, it's so evident.
Well, that was a culture as well. In other words, we talked about Barry, but it's really a culture that we just did automatically. Mm-hmm. It was a thing where we had to have students around to pass this on. If when I show somebody something and it worked, that confirmed it. It confirmed what I know. Oh, it's working. And I create different methodologies and how to get to these different phrases and language and whatnot, write them down. Because before I started, guys would practice years and years and years to attain a certain level. But with the methodology that we have, especially one that Barry showed us, a guy could play decent within a year's time. We can be able to negotiate changes, going through changes in a year's time and whatnot, because of the exercises. He took these different ideas and made exercises out of them.
Yeah, he's like the first person to really codify the language and say, this is what this is. And these notes, and before it was an oral tradition in which it got passed down, just via sound, and figuring it out. But
he would write it down, and he was stickler on the English, the way he would write it.
Create names for things that had never existed before, that are very specific to the bebop idiom. That's the powerful thing about Barry's teaching. It's just, very clear, very straightforward.
Yeah.
He's the closest thing I had to that.
What? Oh.
You were the closest. Man, I went to Barry's Masterclass one time in 2017. It was one of my first of many times going to New York. And when Benny was living out there, Benny was like, "We got to go see Barry." I'm like, "I'm down to see Barry. You've been talking about going to see
Barry Harrison, New York, just for folks that don't know, similar to Wendell and similar to a lot of the great masters of this music, he held a weekly workshop in New York that I think you paid $20, $5.
It was for me, I think it was 10 for 5 for students.
This is like Einstein holding a lecture on physics once a week that is open to anyone of any levels. Just come over. He had rented out a room, and musicians would come. And he unfortunately passed away a few months ago, but he was literally doing it on Zoom until the day he died. He was so passionate about sharing this art form. So sorry to cut you off.
No, you good. That was perfect.
Barry.
Man, Barry had what you say?
That made him, in other words, he played all over the world, but he refused a lot of gigs, And if that's this workshop we're talking about, he wasn't concerned about the money.
He wasn't.
In other words, if you didn't have it, it's cool. Just show up.
His wife
You
was
know.
the one collecting the money when I was going. She was like, she would walk around with a hat like, come on, you gotta give me something.
Who's wife?
Berries.
No.
It might be a different wife from when you was a kid.
But
man.
but okay,
But
okay,
he
yeah.
never did get married.
One of my first experiences going to see Barry in New York, like when Benny Rubin Jr. He's a saxophonist. I went to high school with him. He's from Flint, but he like came up under Wendell's tutelage when he was in high school. So like Benny was like, yeah, we got to go see Barry. I'm like, man, every time you've been talking to me about going to see Barry, I'm here now. Let's go see Barry. So we went to
Barry let him play too.
yeah. So like we went to see Barry, and Barry like imagine this room without this, like just like a big space. It was like a big room with like 50 or more musicians in there,
Crowded, yeah.
including like every instrument, vocals. Like it would be like 6 different bass players, 4 drummers, like 10 singers, 20 saxophone players, 5 trumpet players, and probably 3 trombones. I think that's what it was when I went.
And
So
they all
like
wanna
everybody,
learn. They're all
and
there to
like a
learn.
whole bunch, and like probably like 10 pianists. So like it's and like 4 guitarists. It's like every instrument you could think of. Somebody was in there with an accordion. Yeah, somebody was in there with an accordion, but everybody came to play some bebop.
But see, it's the language. See, you can play it on tuba, piccolo. It doesn't make the instrument doesn't make a difference. And Barry could sing too.
Yeah,
He
he used to get on the singers. That was funny.
So he had a vocal workshop. He had a vocal workshop. I think it was like 10 years ago, and it was on a Tuesday. You know, I went to New York, and the singers was phenomenal. I mean, they could sing, really flexible. Because he was telling them, he was teaching the singers the same thing. At the same time, he was a stickler for grammar too.
Wow.
You know, that's what I was trying to say. When Barry would write his lessons out, he was really particular about how he structured the sentence. He'd write it and then he'd erase it. No, I don't want to say that. It's got to be said like this. You know, very like an English teacher.
Yeah, I remember just a quick aside talking to Charles McPherson, and I asked him about Barry Harrison, and he said, man, Barry was always reading Nietzsche and Freud and all of these, you know, intellectuals, and Charles told me, he said, you know, Kenji, I had to keep up with him musically, but keeping up with him intellectually is a whole other game, you know, and I think that's true of Wendell and a lot of musicians who came up playing bebop in the 50s and 60s. It's like just the genius in so many different facets. It's not often talked about, but it really is true. It's just brilliant folks. But we're running out of time here, so I want to start.
We always run out of time.
We always run out of time. What time is it?
Yeah.
Dang, it's 6.
So,
oh man.
So we want to go ahead and
6:15,
and
6:14.
start to wrap things up. Well, I just thought of the quote. I think Thelonious Monk said, right? Talking about music is like dancing about architecture, you know. So
funny.
that's all to say. At 8 p.m. tonight, for those of you that are watching at home and those of you that are here, these 2 phenomenal musicians are going to be playing music, and we can talk all day long, but
We can.
to hear both of these folks play is a totally heightened level of experience that I wish everybody could experience. So let's give a round of applause for Trunino Lowe and Wendell Harrison.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
8 o'clock.
See
8
y'all
o'clock.
at 8. 8 o'clock. Y'all don't miss it.
And
All right.
we want to thank the Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation for helping us put all of this together. So thank you.
Thank
to
you.
them.
Thank you. Thank you.